Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Renny.
Hi, I'm Lexie.
And I'm Josh. You probably recognize Larry and Renny by now. They have made quite a handful of appearances, especially Larry. Maybe not his entire body at one time.
I try to stay in frame these days.
Okay, that's good to hear. We want to welcome for the very first time on the Literary Gladiators channel, Lexie from A.N. Lashley. She is an up-and-coming booktuber who is making a comeback to the community. We are very happy to have you on board.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. What kind of things should people know about your channel?
I have a booktube/authortube channel, so it has anything to do about books, and it's kind of fair game. I love reviewing books, doing book tags, fun videos, but also doing some writing videos here and there. A lot of your typical kind of booktube content with some fun author things thrown in the mix.
Those are always delightful. I'm hoping you see a big boost in the weeks, months, years to come.
Thank you. I'm hoping so as well.
What kind of writing projects do you have going on?
I have a few things kind of like in the works right now. I had a story that I was working on and it was going great, and then the pandemic hit. I had to put it on hold just because one of the characters gets like unbelievably sick, and it was just one of those things where like it was a hard thing to write while like in the midst of the main part of the pandemic, just kind of understanding like what we were going through as a society. But now that everything's kind of mellowed out more, it's like, okay, I'm in a better mental space to get back into writing that. So that's coming in back into play. And then I've got a fun Greek mythology based story that I'm also working on. So I'm hoping to start really getting into the roots of that one here shortly.
Yeah, that'll be the Greek mythology one will definitely be an intrigue to examine. I definitely would be eager to read whatever you put together.
As soon as I get something that's worthy to show you, absolutely, I would love to get some feedback on it.
Absolutely. And I've noticed that people, you would think that something like a pandemic would stimulate creativity, but in a lot of cases, it didn't necessarily do that much. And I know that a SpongeBob episode was pulled because it had to do with a pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that and the midlife crustacean episode. As far as what we're going over today, we're going to be discussing a play that Renny selected called Sleuth by Anthony Shaffer. Renny, you have a discussion starter?
Does Sleuth seem to apply today as much as it did in the 60s and 70s, maybe?
Does it apply to...
Would it be as popular today as it was then?
Me reading it in today's day and age, it was very enjoyable. I would say that, yes, it does have a sense of appeal, because I think that if something like Sherlock Holmes is able to withstand the test of time, I would argue
I have to say, even though I chose it because I remembered it so well, it unfortunately reminded me of when we did Herman Hesse's Steppenwolf, that was from '68 and was the book to read, that it seemed hackneyed today. And I felt kind of the same way with Sleuth. I felt like I was very eager to review it again, and I saw the movie. I didn't see the 2007 movie. There was another movie, but not really based on the play dialogue. They used the title, and Michael Caine was in it, but I saw the original in '72 with Olivier and McCain. I just thought the whole thing was fabulous. And I have to say, in reading and thinking about it, I felt there was just too much of it that was a little off and sadistic and nasty. It's supposed to be clever.
I think it
up on some of those vibes on the sadistic. It's like,
I thought it was more mean and nasty than it was clever. I certainly didn't feel that way a number of years ago. Readdressing it today, by the time I got to the end, I felt like little ooh.
Yeah, there's something unsettling about the whole thing.
Yes, it is unsettling. Maybe that's good.
I think that in a way it is
exciting. It was exciting. It was.
Yes, I wonder how much of that might be that you are familiar with this story. I could tell you that coming into it, for the first time, I was.
Yeah, you're cold to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really was kind of engrossed in trying to figure out what was going to happen. Like, it really kept me not knowing and guessing. It was enjoyable from that perspective and clever too. But there are moments though when you settle into it and you're getting into the story, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, these people are really messing with each other in a very mean and not good stuff, right?
But at the same time, it's a brilliant chess game that's being played between the two of them. How
Right.
Andrew is setting up Milo to pretty much make his first murder look like Andrew was acting in self-defense. Then Milo gets back at him.
Yes, Milo in the end triumphs. You wouldn't think so from the going through the main part, but in the end, it would. Yeah, and I think rightly so. I think you feel better when it does. I think it's better the character of Andrew, the writer, does not come out well because he is the main gamer,
right?
Most of the story.
He's definitely the worst of the two because of the fact that Milo's kind of being traumatized into this thing by the writer, and there's just something about that element of it where you still kind of root for him, even though he turns kind of cold from it. He's still the more sympathetic character because he walked into it not doing that, even though he was not a good person anyway, right? Because
how would you act?
One of them were exactly one.
Yeah, how would you act if somebody was going after your wife?
Yeah,
I feel like I have a weird, unique perspective because I'm pretty young, so I still have so many books to read. But I'm also a theater person and I'm also an author. So coming into this play, not knowing anything, I was just like, this is a play and it's some sort of mystery type thing. I'm like, cool, that sounds neat. We'll read it, see what I think. And then I start reading and I'm like, what am I getting into? Because this is crazy. I can't believe what I'm reading. The first half, I'm like, it reminded me of older traditional style murder mysteries. I kind of almost got a slight Agatha Christie type, Sherlock Holmes type vibe of just a little bit formulaic, but still enjoyable. And then you get to the back half and I'm just like, I am so confused now, but I enjoyed it. No matter, they were absolutely insane characters. And I'm like, I am glad I don't have to interact with people like this. But
after I reread it,
to read from.
I bought the movie. I bought it off of, what is it? You get on TV. It's not DVR. And I may have seen it in between 1972 and today, but I remember. And there are those things in it. There's a picture of Agatha Christie on the wall. There's a bust of Sir Conan Doyle. There's all these homage to mystery writers. And obviously, when Shaffer wrote it, that's what he intended, but he's very, very different than their work. Yeah. There's much more quirkiness and kinkiness in this than there is in anything that Agatha Christie ever wrote.
I think that there was a sense of absurdism to this.
Yes, it comes out of that tradition.
Yeah, and I've been reading. I mean,
theater. Yes,
I'm noticing a very similar whimsical trend out of the plays that I've been reading as of recent. Because I'm also getting prepared for discussions about Rhinoceros by Eugene Ionesco.
Yeah, right, the same.
And the Zoo Story by Edward Albee. I mean, this one has a bit more structure, but at the same time, the decision-making and the actions among the characters, they're somewhat outlandish. I think that that's what the intent is. I think that it's intentional for them to set each other up in these very odd ways, but yet it all comes out at the end. It all adds up.
Well, in the end, if there is a moral, good triumphs in a way, because Andrew suffers the most. Nobody comes out really well.
Yeah. Milo gets killed, but Andrew is in this position where he's pretty much awaiting the police to make their move.
He's trapped. He's trapped in his own game.
So he's pretty much.
Yeah, and game playing is really right. What it's getting at, what I think the writer's trying to get at there is this idea of not taking things seriously that are meant to be taken seriously, and how that can be dangerous, and how it can warp your perspective and end up making you do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. And we see that with Andrew, especially, I think, in the scene where Milo has convinced him possibly that he has killed that other woman, and how he doesn't care. Andrew, he's completely ambivalent about it, and he's having more fun kind of playing this game than thinking about the fact that this murder, as far as he knows, just happened. So, I think that he is warped, right? And I don't know if it's because he spent his whole life making things up or what, however that happened, but he's got this warped perspective where everything's a game.
Even in the very beginning with his first proposition that they'll have a fake burglary, but it won't matter to Andrew because he'll get the money from the insurance, and then then Milo will get whatever he gets. Actually won't be real. From then on, everything goes a little bit sideways.
He made him dress up in a clown suit.
Yeah, the clown suit is dreadful. Oh, terrible.
To humiliate him.
Yeah, he made him pretty, because usually when people engage in those kind of robberies, they do so in a disguise.
Well, I have to say, it's easier in some ways to read it about the clown suit if you should see the movie. And it's an excellent movie. Everybody in it got nominated for an Academy Award. They didn't win all the things because that year in 72, they were up against lots of other things. But on the other hand, it was really, really well done. There's no doubt about it. It was very, very, very popular. when you see it, just read it. When you see it and you see Milo in this clown suit and he's so humiliated, it's very upsetting, very upsetting. More so than that it is on the written page.
He rebounds because in that second act, he's great with character development. Inspector Doppler is
really Milo.
Yeah, that's clearly him. And I think we can make the assumption that Detective Sergeant Tarrant and Police Constable Higgs are also both Milo, because we never see them.
Right.
We just see Milo go off the stage and answer the door. The way that they edge it, it's almost as if he's having a conversation with himself. It would probably definitely be that way on the stage. I think we can make the assumption that the intent is that they're all in one the same.
Well, it's exquisitely done. It's really well plotted. And for only being really the two characters, it's a tour de force.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
Playing part, but I think it's difficult to read today.
It's got this kind of, I want to say, esoteric feel to it with the humiliation ritual, right? Like, I know that is something that in these secret societies and stuff, that is something that is done, is the humiliation ritual. And then the death and the rebirth is another theme, right? So it's almost like Milo is being initiated into this other way of looking at
that, but you're right. Yes, there's a lot of religious kind of symbolism that runs through it.
Yeah, and we see that when Andrew comments about how Milo is cold, and he said, I don't think anybody could get this cold, right? So you're wondering, well, Milo has really transformed into somebody else as a result of what Andrew did to him. A lot of that stuff is unsettling because it is trauma-based, right? It's the fact that he's being traumatized to that level, where now he has become more sadistic than he might have been otherwise earlier as a result.
Allegedly, Milo brings up the fact that he's an agnostic. Andrew was saying how he wouldn't have been concerned if he was Jewish or even half Jewish. From that backdrop, that was perhaps a sense of concern, especially being married to someone like Marguerite, which Andrew's constantly feeding into that desire that Milo has. That's the initial trap, is Milo coming in with Andrew having in mind that he knows Milo is looking to pursue his wife. So in that case, I think it was, one of you said that there's more sympathy that's garnered for Milo, but yet the fact that Milo is looking to engage in adultery and covet his neighbor's wife, that in itself is setting yourself up for disaster.
And it plays into that same theme that the whole play is kind of going into, about taking things seriously that ought to be taken seriously, like another man's marriage,
Yeah, so
at that point, he's playing games right there.
I have equal amount of sympathy for none of them.
Yeah.
Well, that is a problem. There is not a true sympathetic character, and the women don't sound attractive either Marguerite, the wife, who's evidently had other affairs, so Milo is not the first affair, and Tia, who was the mistress of Andrew, if she dies, he's not all that concerned one way or the other, just another woman.
It's kind of like the Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, and how we're dealing with upper class people who are in such a state that they're so frivolous and trivial. They're living a life that's so pointless. Yeah.
It's like they're bored, right? It's like they're bored.
Pretty much.
Well, there is definitely a class thing, and especially because Laurence Olivier playing Andrew, he was the premier Shakespeare actor of his day, and Kane is just coming on the scene. He comes out of a movie in the 60s to begin with, Alfie, and supposedly when they started to film, this isn't the play, but when they started to film, Olivia, they kind of thought that Kane was very second banana, and came to realize in the end, that they had really kind of equal talent. But I'm sure it is supposed to show that, because one has the Oxford British accent and the other has the low-class London accent. One is highly successful writer, and the other is he has a beauty salon. He's a hairdresser. We don't say that today. We say cosmetician. He would have been a hairdresser.
That or a beautician, I've heard too.
Beautician today, yes. But that was not a high-class activity or vocation. So yes, there's a big class thing.
And then that also probably plays into why Andrew is more adept at this kind of game playing, right? Because of the fact that he can afford to be where, he has time to play all these games in his imagination and try to come up with plots and things. So that, it's like, it's kind of detached from reality in a way.
He's successful and he's wealthy. I mean, that's a given for it.
And he's written detective stories.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that his job is kind of detached from reality in a way that Andrew's wouldn't.
I feel like in a way, like he kind of has to be, because in order for him to write that many murder mysteries and be successful with it, you have to have some sort of separation between your work and yourself. And so I feel like he unfortunately didn't ever find that separation of this is where the emotions stop for work and this is where emotions kick back on for real life. And so he just kind of forgot to flip the switch to turn it back on, and he just doesn't care.
Right. Yeah. And it makes you wonder, like, if he ever did, or if he did, if at one point he was better suited to handle that, and then it dissolved over time, you know, with his marriage and things kind of falling apart. Because it is like his sanity is kind of called into question throughout the play too, right? Like, I mean, he'll just start barking out lines.
He is a disturbed person. There's no doubt.
And when you concoct those things together, you end up having this game that he plays with Milo. Anything else that anybody was looking to bring up, as far as anything else was concerned?
Well, we usually talk about whether we would recommend it or not, or how highly we would recommend it. And I would certainly recommend it. I am the one who suggested it, but I have to say that people should be forewarned that there's a peculiar twists and turns of some psychological. It's working on your mind at the same time that you're participating in reading or seeing it.
It was a thrill to read. I think that the initial read of it is probably the greatest adventure as far as making your way through this is concerned, because I thought that Milo could have made his way back into the story, and I realized that there were only two actors in the entire piece. That was quite the curveball, that Milo was Inspector Doppler, and then it only makes sense that the other two members of law enforcement are a filament of Milo's mind. I think that he had that sense of cleverness to compete in that game. Andrew was feeding him that information, like on page 45, where he pretty much laid out his strategy to the inspector, but he was feeding the information to the person that he tricked. I wrote the whole statement down. The fact that he persuaded him to get out of his clothes and dress up as a clown.
Terrible.
Yeah, lead him to the vault, make it look like he was going to break into it, act out of self-defense, when in actuality he was setting him up because he was a threat. It was pretty terrible. Not only was it a very clever strategy, but it was also a very creative strategy. Yeah, and I think that these kinds of things are ideas that were inspired by Andrew's writing.
Well, I'm sure that the clown has an extra symbol in it, thinking that, you know, life is a circus kind of thing. Life is a carnival. Mm-hmm. All part of the circus of life. And then there are people that are horrendously afraid of clowns. There's a name, it's not clown phobia, but there is
chlorophobia. Chlorophobia, though, has picked up immensely since this play has been written. I think a lot of it stems from it.
I think it comes from Stephen King. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure there were small children, even maybe when I was small. It didn't affect me. This has nothing to do with the clowns. But when my sister was very small, and we would go at Christmas, and you went to Santa Claus, and you went into the city to do this real big deal in the 40s and 50s. She was scared to death of Santa, and many children are. They're scared to death of that person in the costume. And so the clown would have that same effect on many people. And this clown is terrible. The costume is terrible, and it is an exercise in abuse, meant to be abusive.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is that these two men are just abusing each other, right, throughout the duration of the play, through lies and deception. And it's just, you know, like you said, it's mean. It's just mean.
But I think it makes it interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
I did not see the meanness. When I was younger, I did not pick up on the viciousness of Andrew as much. I saw it as the game. I saw it as they were playing off each other and so forth. But then actually reading the text, I hadn't read the text in 50 years. It affected me entirely differently now than it did originally.
I think they
I felt that about a number of things. I told you, I reread The Brothers Karamazov a couple summers ago, which I loved in college. I just thought Dostoevsky was absolutely the limit. And I thought, oh my God, this was terrible. I'll say this, Pasternak Zhivago holds up. I'm looking at a lot of, because I just read Les Mis, which I had never read before. I did War and Peace 4 or 5 years ago. Next summer it'll be Moby Dick, which I've never finished. I've only gotten so far in it and couldn't finish it. I'm not really fond of Melville.
I think Larry can tell you how much what I think about Dostoevsky after reading Crime and Punishment.
I love Dostoevsky. I read Crime and Punishment. I read all of it. I read all of him. I just thought he was wonderful and expressed. Well, this is the 60s. I'm reading it in the 60s that expressed society and was right on target for where we were at the time. And now it's very melodramatic and ancient. And you know what it is like? If you go and see some so-called modern art was developed right out of after World War II and was shocking and so forth. And now it looks
like that one artist that urinates on the canvas.
Yeah, or even Picasso with his eyes on elbows and nipples on fingertips. I mean, that was oh my God, you know, people rioted at art galleries when his stuff was shown. If you go and see it now, it's like this really doesn't make sense, and who cares?
But as far as Sleuth is concerned, I think that both of the major characters got what they deserved, and how Andrew became ridden with guilt, even though Milo pretty much took the match. It cost him his life.
Yeah, it did. Well, so, he won, but he died. That was in the end, he won the game because Andrew's going to have to pay for it.
It depends on what the game is. If the game is survival, or if the game is.
At the time in England, they were still hanging people for murder. It was not. It was not. You didn't get off for good behavior. So it was going to be a really serious penalty.
Where would you stand, Lexie, as far as recommending this was concerned?
I personally would recommend it because it's one of those things where I read it the first time and I'm just like sitting there and enjoying it and forgetting that I'm supposed to be like really remembering what I'm reading because I have to talk about it afterwards. And then like afterwards I go through and it's just like going through it like multiple times. It's just one of those books that are stories that I feel like you can go through multiple times and you kind of pick up on different things that maybe you kind of noticed but weren't quite sure what you were supposed to be noticing yet, and then you kind of have more puzzle pieces. And when I found, like, my copy says that like about the 2 movies, and I was like, so I need to find these movies. We need to watch them. This is going to be a date night movie, apparently, with me and my husband, because I'm like, I think
I see the 72, the first one. I haven't seen the 2007. It's got the Kane plays the part. He played Milo in the first part. He plays Andrew in the second movie, and then Jude Law plays the Milo part. I'm sure that was probably done very well. In reading up on it, it said that they don't use the stage dialogue, so maybe there was a copyright problem or something. I went in 2007. I probably saw 40 movies a year, and I didn't see that movie. But see the 72. That's a spectacular movie.
I want to find that one. It's just a matter of like where I can find it, because that's the version I want to read, because I heard it's pretty accurate to the book.
It's really heart-stopping.
It is interesting how Michael Caine goes on from playing one character to the other. That definitely shows a testament of one's range. And
yes, he is an actor who played. We don't have too many of them today, but there were all like Spencer Tracy and Gable and all of that generation, Jimmy Stewart, and so forth. They played comedy, they played drama, they played westerns, they played Three Musketeers. They could do everything. And Caine, I think, was that kind of actor, even though he said he deliberately kept his Cockney accent, which he said in the beginning was, especially in British theater, was a big negative for him. He just came along at a time when we were doing more realistic kind of lower class characters, perhaps, that he came into it. And of course, Britain in the 60s, that was the mod, that was the Beatles, that was the place to be out of that. But he was, Bruce Willis is that kind of an actor. He does sci-fi, he does comedy. I've always loved Caine.
It is very important to have a great range like that. Didn't Michael Caine was also Scrooge in Muppets Christmas Carol?
He's also Alfred in the Batman movies.
Yeah.
That's how we know him from. I told my husband, I'm like, Alfred is in this, and he's like, Alfred is it, and I'm like, yes, Michael Caine is in
the thing.
Which Batman movies?
The Dark Knight trilogy.
Okay. Then it wouldn't have been the earlier.
No, it wasn't.
First series of movies. Technically, the 66 one is the very first. That was the cheesy cult classic.
Something special about it.
Do we have any final thoughts about Sleuth?
Well, I gave you my final thoughts. I think it's very much worth reading, but you should be prepared that some of it's a little strange.
Absurdism is becoming a favorite area of mine as far as plays are concerned, but I definitely think that this is
more grounded, right? It's not like the other absurdist stuff that we read tends to be less grounded. Acknowledges like an existence of rules in life, but then says, well, what if people didn't take those rules seriously, right? As opposed to like the traditional absurdism that we look at is like these rules don't exist. There's just
Yeah, I
figments
wouldn't.
of our imagination kind of a.
Yeah, it's not absurdist in the way of Samuel Beckett or Eugene Ionesco. I think it has these, the way that people act and their
It is from that
rationality.
era. It does come out of that time when that was the avant-garde in
Yeah, but still, I'd say it's more grounded than those other pieces are. It's got an acknowledgement of an objective truth, right? Because I really think that that's what the play is getting at, is that these lies are what's causing these problems, right? It's kind of like that's what I think it's getting at. So in order for there to be lies, there has to be a truth. And so, I don't know if the absurdists would agree.
Yeah, no, I mean, you all kind of are voicing my opinions. There definitely is like some absurdity to it, but it's almost like absurd, but in an entertaining kind of way. Because there's like two different, for me at least, there are like two different levels of absurd. There's like absurd just to be absurd for no reason, and it doesn't make sense. And there's no other, like, there's no good reason for it. And then I feel like this falls into the other category of it's absolutely absurd. And there are things that you're just like, what is happening? This is not how people actually react, but it's making a statement and it's a talking point, which is why it's entertaining to watch. And
I think in a way the former does have a connection with the latter, and how you seem to question how in the world can this make sense, but then you put two and two together, and that's the argument that Larry and I had about Bald Soprano.
Well, you are when you go to the theater. That's why I haven't been back to the movies, but I'm in what I call a movie crew. We almost every Saturday for many, many years went to the movies until we hit the pandemic here. Is that even like the ancient Greek mysteries? You went into a dark cave, you experienced an epiphany of some kind, and you had your catharsis, and you were a better person. And you're supposed to suspend your disbelief, come into that kind of a state. And you certainly have to do that with Sleuth. And you would in a theater, you will do it. You'll believe it.
As far as Lexie's argument is concerned, I think that this particular play fits more into the latter statement as far as the absurdity in order to make a statement, and in particular, pretty much address how frivolous Andrew and Milo are and the fantasy land that they're both living. As far as fantasy is concerned, I think Andrew is living much more in a fantasy land than Milo, but Milo pretty much agrees to take part in the dance, per se.
Yeah, he's, like I said, it's an initiation thing. He is initiated into this perspective and decides to play in it. And it doesn't end well for anybody.
Initiation. This is the thrillingest looking fraternity I've ever seen.
Initiation gone very, very wrong.
How would we rate this? 0 to 5 stars with half stars permitted?
I'd say 3.5 stars. I give it 3.5. I thought it was pretty good. It was better than I thought in the first act. In the first act, it just kind of looks like it's just going to be like a Columbo episode, maybe, or something like that. But then as soon as the lights go out there, you realize, oh wait, there's a lot more going on than I thought. So it definitely got better.
It's not the typical act of Christian.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. Definitely keeps you wanting to.
I do the same thing. I give it a 3.5 to 4. It will definitely engage you.
This is hard because I don't usually rate things because I feel like everybody has a different rating scale. Going off of how I typically kind of in my head rate them, I would probably say a 3.5 or a 4. I don't quite know which of the two I would land on, just because like I was able to see so much potential. Like also like I see what it is as a play, all of the things it addresses and the characters that I think Shaffer did an amazing job writing the characters. I think the characters are extremely fascinating. They're very flawed and very awful characters, but they were written beautifully. They played off of each other very well. Like, reading it made me want to go watch the movies. It made me want to find if there's a play to be able to go physically watch it. And I feel like that's a good sign of a good play. Like reading is, if it makes you want to go watch it, I feel like it did its job. Because if it was just like a boring thing and you read it, you're like, I'm good. I can put it on the shelf and forget about it. But if it keeps you wanting to see more, I feel like that's a good in my book.
I'm going to give it a 4 as well. It was a very intriguing play. I think that, as you said, Lexie, it would be something that I would want to see on the stage. I think that the characters and their chemistry with one another was very fascinating. I wouldn't say it was perfect as far as their execution of the strategies was concerned, especially how Andrew was talking to an inspector that could very well be charging him with the crime that he's being accused of by displaying, pretty much showing his hand, maybe more so leave out some of those details. I still think that it was a very masterful game between the two of them. It was a psychological chess game where one was looking to go after the other, with Andrew defending his wife, whereas Milo was looking to pursue her. It really goes to show you that after Marguerite and her history with having affairs, the whole thing, their approach to it, was quite trivial. If you are interested in checking out Sleuth, I got my copy from Samuel French, which is now Concord Theatricals. I had quite a thing with these and Dramatist Play Services. They have quite an intriguing collection of plays that span quite a nice range. Once you start getting some of them, you're going to become addicted and get more of them. DPS, Dramatist Play Service, even opened up their own bookstore in New York City. If I ever made my way in there, it would probably put my wallet on a diet.
I have a feeling it's a good thing I don't live in New York, because I would spend way too much money in that store, I can already tell.
We live in New Jersey, so it's within driving distance. But the closer you go to New York, the more bookstores you have to choose from. But then again, when I went with Ellie to New York City, the only bookstore we went to, which was within reach of where we went, which was Museum of Modern Art, was Postman's at Rockefeller Center. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this discussion, and I really want to thank Lexie for joining us for our discussion about Sleuth. That was quite a delight to have you on board.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I had a lot of fun.
Alrighty then, be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.